Welcome to this evening's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. I'm Scott Schaefer, Senior Politics Correspondent at KQED and co-host of Political Breakdown, where Steve Hilton has been a guest at least a couple times. Today I'm going to be talking with gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton, but first he's going to share some remarks with you. And a few reminders before we get started. Today's program is being recorded, so we kindly ask that you silence your cell phones for the duration of the program. And if you have any questions, please fill them out. There should be some cards that are on the seats, or if you're joining us online, you can do that through the YouTube chat. Let me just tell you a little bit more about our speaker. In June, Republican Steve Hilton won the second spot in a crowded field for California governor. He's advancing to face Democrat Xavier Becerra in November. Steve Hilton is a former Fox News commentator and political advisor. He was endorsed by President Trump and promises to, quote, restore the California dream by cutting government spending and waste, reducing taxes and energy prices, and slashing regulations. Please join me in welcoming Steve Hilton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. It's a great honor to be here at the Commonwealth Club. Commonwealth Club, obviously, has always been a place where Californians come together to think seriously about the future of our state. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that today, not least because we have a really serious decision to make in this state right now. Are we going to sleepwalk off what I consider to be the economic cliff that we are facing, or will we wake up and change direction before it's too late? Whenever you point out that California is actually failing economically, you always get the same answer from the political establishment. But we're the fourth biggest economy in the world. I'm proud of that. I want our state to be big and successful. In fact, the plan that I'm announcing here today will help make us the third biggest economy in the world. But thank you very much. I think we can all be excited about that. But size is not the same as health. A healthy economy works for the people who live in it. Today, we have the highest poverty rate in America, tied with Louisiana, the highest unemployment rate of all 50 states. Nearly a third of Californians cannot afford basic necessities. U.S. News and World Report just ranked California 50th out of 50 states for opportunity. We used to define opportunity and the American dream. Now we are America's worst performer. We pride ourselves on being the home of entrepreneurs and innovation. Of course, there are fantastic businesses being started here all the time, but we make it so difficult. Chief Executive Magazine's annual survey just ranked California 50th out of 50 states for business climate. Our cost of living, the highest in the country, by far the highest housing costs, the lowest home ownership, the highest gas prices, electric bills that doubled in the last 10 years, more than double the national average. Same for water, the highest grocery prices, insurance that's either unaffordable or unavailable, the highest income tax, sales tax, gas tax, all for the worst outcomes on nearly everything that matters. School results, for example, among the poorest in the country, with less than half our students meeting basic standards in English and only a third in math. But not to worry, says my opponent, Xavier Becerra. Quote, people are still coming to Disneyland and our beaches. Now, in the past, we may have been able to get away with that, not anymore. CNN's Fareed Zakaria recently described California as a case study in his term, failed governance. He pointed out that over the last 7 years, California has lost a net 1.9 million people to other states, taking over $100 billion of net income. Businesses are doing the same. Over the last decade, nearly 2,000 companies moved their headquarters out of California. Charles Schwab, Oracle, Hewlett-Packard, McKesson, Tesla, SpaceX, CBRE, Palantir, and many more, including many manufacturing firms that aren't household names. For every large tech company that started in California, the majority of their workforce is now outside the state. The biggest winner has been Texas. From 2019 through 2023, roughly 230,000 California tax returns moved to Texas, taking nearly $30 billion in income. No wonder. The comparison is brutal. California's top tax rate is 13.3%. Texas, 0. California taxes corporate income at 8.84%. Texas has no traditional corporate income tax, although it does impose a franchise tax. Now, just the threat of a so-called billionaire tax has driven many more billions of dollars in wealth and tax revenue out of our state. Imagine if this unconstitutional assault on success were actually implemented. Is this some kind of suicide mission? It's certainly not a partisan political point. It's the market rendering its verdict. We are simply not competitive. We are losing. Apart from anything else, businesses don't want to be someplace where their workers can't afford to live. The median home in Los Angeles now sells for just over $1 million. Dallas is half. Rand found that building multifamily housing in California costs 2.3 times as much as it does in Texas and takes nearly 2 years longer to finish a project. We made it impossibly expensive and a horrendous hassle to build anything, and then the politicians who did it feign outrage at our housing shortage. Infrastructure is even worse. Since high-speed rail was approved in 2008, $15 billion has been spent, half the original budget, with 0 miles of track being laid. In those 18 years, China has built 30,000 miles of high-speed rail. Spain has built 2,500, France 1,700. Even Morocco built 120 miles. In fact, the French team who helped with that project were originally working here in California, but left because conditions were, quote, too dysfunctional. Look, I've been traveling California, listening to workers, managers, entrepreneurs, and business owners in every sector of our economy, in every part of our state for the last 5 years. Here's what I found. There are 5 forces driving business and opportunity out of California. If you like, 5 horsemen of the Calipocalypse: taxes, regulation, litigation, union power, and climate posturing. And I use that word very specifically, posturing. First, our uncompetitive tax rate is, of course, driven by incontinent spending. As my Democrat colleague in the governor's race, Matt Mahan, regularly pointed out, California's budget has more than doubled in the last 10 years, from $170 billion to just over $350 billion. And as Matt would ask, is what we're getting in return twice as good? We have to scale this bloated budget back, and tomorrow in Sacramento, I'll be laying out the first stage of my plan to do just that. Second, regulation. Yes, of course, government should set standards and protect the public, but the noxious torrents of legislative diarrhea from Sacramento are out of control. In their latest session, they passed 1,118 bills. We are the most over-regulated state in America, with the total cost of regulatory bloat estimated at $745 billion a year. Cut that out, and California would pretty much become the 3rd biggest economy in the world, right there. The third destructive force for our economy is litigation. PAGA, CEQA, workers' comp, insurance. Did you know that roughly half the businesses operating in California are currently in litigation? Did you know that if you open a business in this state, you stand a 90% chance of being sued? California's tort tax, as it's sometimes called, is estimated to impose direct costs of around $70 billion and lost economic output of $100 billion. The trial lawyers are even lobbying against self-driving cars because they are, wait for it, too safe. They want more accidents so they can make more money from them. And it's all driven by a corrupted political process. The trial lawyers who benefit from this racket are among the top donors to Democrat politicians. Speaking of a corrupted system, our fourth force of economic destruction, excessive government union power. I've always been pro-worker. I was raised in a working-class immigrant home. My parents are Hungarian. My mother worked in a shoe store. My stepdad worked construction. My first job was project manager for a construction company. The workers who build our roads, homes, factories, and infrastructure, they deserve good pay, safe conditions, and respect. But they are tired of union bosses selling them out for left-wing policies that destroy jobs, drive up costs, lock out smaller contractors, and turn building into political patronage. Government unions have become the dominant power in Sacramento, extorting the outrageous unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities they foisted on future generations. We just cannot afford this insider dealing anymore. Neither can we afford the fifth driver of economic failure, climate posturing. Protecting our environment is part of the soul of our state. I'm as passionate an environmentalist as you'll find, but I'm not an ideological zealot. Shutting down production here, then importing the same fossil fuel from Iraq and the Amazon rainforest is not environmental leadership. It is pointless self-harm. Tax, regulation, litigation, union power, and climate posturing. It is driving us towards the cliff's edge. Hollywood is the warning sign. For a century, people assumed the entertainment industry would always be here. Now, productions, sound stages, and thousands of middle-class jobs are moving elsewhere. Nothing has a right to last forever. At one point, 6 of the 10 richest cities in America were in not California or Texas or New York, but Ohio. America is competition. Other states aren't waiting for California to wake up. On the road, I hear the stories from businesses every day. We're waiting till November. If we don't change direction, this is where California will end up. Just another rust belt with better weather. A downward spiral will accelerate. San Francisco's notorious doom loop, statewide. Millions more will leave. Home values will decline. Property tax revenue will crash. Unemployment will rise. More crime, more homelessness, more failing infrastructure. 4 more years of our current ruinous policies, and the Rust Belt might even look attractive in comparison. But this sad decline is not inevitable. In fact, San Francisco itself shows what can be done with fresh leadership. California still has the greatest innovation culture on earth, the best technology ecosystem ever created, fantastic universities, talented workers, entrepreneurs, artists, creators, natural beauty, diverse culture, ports, fertile agricultural land, the rebel spirit that created industries that have changed the world. We have everything we need to be truly, expansively, abundantly amazing. Everything except a proactive, pro-business governor and government. This is an emergency. And the worst thing we could do now is move even further in the direction that brought us to this point. So we have to stand firm against the further rise of socialism in California and what that would mean for our economic future. Because the truth is, the threat to California workers' jobs, incomes, and quality of life comes not from some billionaire class, but from the socialist-leaning bureaucrat class that's been in power here for so long and so cruelly dashed the prospects for our state and especially our youth. The kind of policies that seem to be winning the support of young, college-educated elites in Michigan and New York, they've given us in California the highest youth unemployment rate of all 50 states except Delaware. We have to move in the opposite direction. We have to grow our tax base. We need millions of new jobs. That's why restoring our economic competitiveness will be the central mission of my first term as governor. It's why today I'm proposing a simple but spectacular future ambition, worthy of the greatest achievements of our past, a new decade of building. For 10 years, one overriding priority: build again, and not just software. Build homes that families can afford, factories, semiconductor plants, and AI infrastructure. The next generation of advanced manufacturing, aerospace, defense, cars, trucks, ships, rockets, everything. Build film studios and sound stages. Build nuclear power plants, reservoirs, canals, desalination plants, and water recycling facilities. Roads, bridges, rails, and ports. Build beautiful new towns and cities that will be the wonder of the world. We need to think big to reclaim our crown as the undisputed home of the future. Now, in one limited but extremely influential respect, of course, that is already happening, very close to us here, of course, in the form of the AI revolution. But it seems to me that California is getting the policy conversation wrong when it comes to AI. We're in danger of over-regulating its productive uses while under-regulating potential harms. We need stronger protections for children. We need stronger protections for artists, musicians, writers, and creators, clearer rules against fraud, impersonation, and abuse. But we mustn't drive the jobs and investment away. AI is not just chatbots. It's robotics, precision manufacturing, autonomous systems, drug discovery, logistics, energy, construction. As AI-enabled automation reduces the advantage of cheap overseas labor, companies will be able to build closer to their customers again. But those factories will go where electricity is reliable and affordable, where land is available, where housing costs are reasonable, where permits are fast, and where one lawsuit can't destroy a project after years of investment. Right now, all those jobs, all of them, are heading to Texas, Ohio, Tennessee, Nevada, Arizona. Who in their right mind would bring them here? As an investor put it to me recently, California is top of the don't go there list. California invented this technology. AI should be at the heart of our new decade of building. But we're miles from realizing that potential today. For this new decade of building, we need strong policy foundations, and that will require dramatic action. Is it really too much to ask that it shouldn't take longer to approve a factory than to build one? Too much to ask that California should be at least as competitive as other states? All the things that other states have done incrementally to make themselves more competitive than California, let's catch them up in one big bang early next year. Tort reform in Texas, deregulation in Tennessee, tax reform in Florida. We don't even need to exceed these other states because people and businesses would rather be in California. We just need to not be worse. In my first week as governor, I will call a special session of the legislature to seek a 10-year suspension of all rules, regulations, government-imposed costs, bureaucratic processes and bloat that are driving business away and stopping us from building. Here's what that would eliminate. CEQA abuse that allows special interests to delay housing, factories, power, water, and transportation projects for years. PAGA lawsuits that enrich trial attorneys while workers get pennies on the dollar. Vehicle miles traveled rules that block housing and jobs because Sacramento bureaucrats don't approve of where people want to live. Serial litigation designed to kill projects through delay. Regulations that add cost without delivering a clear public benefit. Taxes that punish investment, work, and job creation. Clean air and clean water standards will be retained. Real environmental protection will be enhanced. All-round worker welfare will be improved. But the weaponization of these legitimate aims to stop us from building, that would end. For 10 years, California would become the easiest, not the hardest place in America to build something that matters. Now, energy specifically electricity, must be at the heart of it. To show you just how far behind we are right now, California has around 90 gigawatts of installed electricity generating capacity. Texas has nearly double that at 170. The USA, 1,400. China, meanwhile, over 4,000. I want California to lead America in this very real global energy competition. Now, some people will say this is impossible. But why? Why is it impossible to make California the most affordable place to build a home? We were once before. We've got plenty of land. Depending how you measure it, only 5 to 6% of our land is developed. We could increase it another percentage point, that's 1 million acres or so, and we'd have room for 5 million people in single-family homes and at least a doubling of our manufacturing capacity. And if we pass Proposition 45 this year, a major roadblock to building will already have been removed by the people. The special interests will fight this. Every delay, every mandate, and every lawsuit gives someone more power and money. So I don't want to pretend this is easy or cost-free. It will be a lean time for bureaucrats and lawyers. But the future of our state is surely more important than any special interest. I'm asking business leaders to join me. I'm asking workers and labor leaders to join me, Democrat mayors and county supervisors, Republicans and independents. But above all, I'm asking the legislators of both parties to join me, because they're the ones that can help make or break this vision. Now, if they reject this offer, I am well prepared to use executive authority and the governor's control of state agencies to achieve as much of it as possible incrementally. But that would obviously be slower, harder, and suboptimal. Why would we choose that? Let's do this together, a broad coalition for a new decade of building. This isn't actually left versus right. It's builders versus blockers, creativity versus bureaucracy, growth versus decline. I chose California. I came here because this was the greatest place in the world to build something. That was the California dream. If you worked hard, took risks, built something, hired people, met a need, your future would be brighter here than anywhere else on earth. I want every young Californian to believe that again. And I'm telling you right now, I see it in their faces and what they say to me. They do not believe that today. We cannot let California walk off that cliff. We owe it not just to all of us here, our children and grandchildren. What we do here matters far beyond. We are not just any other state. California means to America what America means to the world. A bright, shining, golden inspiration, energy, optimism, innovation, hustle, that rebel spirit. Let's set it free. Let's build. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, very nice speech.
Thank you very much.
You should go into TV or something.
Well, the thing is, it's very interesting. Can I just do one of the, that's the first time I've done that. I was just saying to you, Scott, usually I just talk, but I wanted to make sure I got the argument straight. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think obviously political reality, it's been 20 years since a Republican got elected governor. And if you were to win in November, it would be a political earthquake. Right?
Yes.
And in all likelihood, the legislature would still be controlled by Democrats. Maybe it wouldn't be a supermajority. Maybe it would be. So how, you said call a special session. Okay, a governor can do that. But for anything to get to your desk, you have to get a majority of people in the legislature. So how would you approach that?
The way I think about it, Scott, is first of all to note that and I touched on it in the speech, and there's more that I'll unpack now. In the primary, I did lots of these debates, and you saw them, and with the other candidates. And what was striking was how much common ground there was, actually. Almost unanimous in terms of the problem and the diagnosis of the problem. I remember the very first event we did together that I participated in. It was a Chamber of Commerce forum, not a TV debate. This would have been about a year ago, in the summer last year. And I think it was me and 6 of the Democrats. I think at that point, Eleni Kounalakis was still in the race and a couple of others. And I just remember Katie Porter was there, Antonio Villaraigosa, and the way that it was arranged, I went last. And I remember the first question, one by one, they all made the same points that I was about to. Antonio stood up and said, "We have the worst business climate in America. We have to do something about it." Katie Porter stood up and said, "Our cost of living is the highest in the country. We have to." Everyone agrees on the problem. Many of us agreed on the solution. Matt Mahan and I have a very similar approach when it comes to housing reform and the regulations affecting that.
But as you know,
Katie Porter adopted my tax plan. So I think that actually in the legislature, there is going to be some common ground. And my last thing I'll say, my attitude is to be open and collaborative. Before moving here in 2012, I was senior advisor in the UK government to Prime Minister David Cameron. He's a Conservative Prime Minister. It was a coalition government. And it was 2 parties, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats. And I was part of the team that negotiated the coalition agreement. I shared an office in 10 Downing Street, right next to the cabinet room, with my opposite number in another party. We sat down every day and tried to work things out. I didn't always succeed, but I'm looking forward to that.
What would you see, where would you be willing to compromise? You know, you coming in, you have a lot of ideas, you've identified the problem. The solutions always are more complicated than identifying the problem.
Probably scale and speed. So I would, as I just laid out, suspend pretty much everything quickly.
But how?
Well, because all of these are legislative. Many of these things have been set up through, well, they're different categories. A lot of the burdens and the blockages are set up through legislation. The legislature can undo that. Secondly, they are implemented by the agencies of the state, of the executive branch. In many cases, the agencies are actually going further than is set out in the statutory language. So that's an area where the governor actually unilaterally can rein them in. If CARB, the California Air Resources Board, is actually going further in implementing, for example, AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act, then you can rein that in. So I would like to go as fast and as far as possible, but in order to get some progress, we may need to take it in smaller steps with the legislature.
You mentioned, whenever somebody runs for office, Javier Becerra is your opponent. You've pointed out his record with Department of Health and Human Services. Others have talked about what he's done as Attorney General, whatever. You haven't run for office before in this country, or anywhere for that matter. You mentioned you worked for David Cameron. You were a big proponent of Brexit. Do you think Brexit was a mistake? Do you think it failed? Has it succeeded? Would you do it again? And I ask because you're not running for prime minister, but judgment. It's about judgment.
Yep.
You said over there that you hated bureaucracy and you wanted to cut regulation, as you're saying now. But Brexit, by and large, has been viewed to be not good for the United Kingdom.
I agree. It's actually. What's striking about the implementation of Brexit is that it's led to more I'm not in close touch with it, but you speak to people in the UK and people in business and they say it's got more bureaucratic. The bureaucracy has increased. Employment regulations have increased. Immigration has gone up, even though the promise of Brexit was to bring it more into control. And so I think that what you've seen since Brexit passed in 2016, well, first of all, you had 3 years where nothing happened because you had a prime minister in charge of it, Theresa May, who I know well, who actually was against it. It was a mess. There was a real political mess.
Well, go ahead, sorry.
And then Boris Johnson was selected by the Conservative Party. He came in, immediately hit by the pandemic, mishandled that, in my view. And so it's just a sort of catalogue of errors. But the end result is that what was promised in the Brexit referendum has completely failed to materialize.
Was it maybe overpromised?
No, I think it's very straightforward, which is that in terms of, I remember working in 10 Downing Street and being really stunned by the the fact that the government, which notionally the Prime Minister was the head of, was constantly announcing things and implementing things that not only were not in the coalition agreement that was negotiated, but were things that we disagreed with. We did an audit of the actions of the government, not legislation, just the daily administrative actions. 70% were not in the platform that we ran on, and most of those were implementing EU regulations that never had any kind of democratic process attached to them. And so my view was that that the bureaucracy coming from the EU was just not only stifling business and causing a massive problem with economic productivity and competitiveness in the UK, but it's actually illegitimate because it never had any popular support in terms of anybody voting for it.
Many challengers or people running for office will identify waste, fraud, and abuse, as the first thing they're going to go after. Elon Musk came in with Doge and promised initially to cut $2 trillion from the federal government. He lowered that by, half to $1 trillion. In the end, it was about $110 billion and change, with some would say a lot of damage to some of the agencies, along the way. So how would you apply what's happened in that scale nationally with California? Like, what are the lessons learned?
Well, to be thoughtful and to be considered in how you approach these things. I've actually conducted a similar exercise in the UK many years ago. In 2010, when we were there, we called it the Red Tape Challenge, and it was an initiative that I got going, and that came to not very much, honestly. So I learned a lot of lessons from that, including how difficult it is to really make the change happen. But I learned about how you do it correctly, and it needs to be clear, considered, and you got to really take your time about in terms of preparing and getting into it. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be laying out in detail some of the specific ways in which we will reduce the budget. Now, remember, the starting point is the budget of California has more than doubled in the last 10 years. So, look, and everyone would agree, we're not getting twice as much value from it. The second point is that the purpose of reducing the budget and spending is so that we can actually deal with the fact that we have the highest taxes in the country, and the benefit to me, it goes right to this cost of living question. As I always say, the quickest, most direct way of helping people with the cost of living is to put more money in their pockets. And the best way of doing that, the most direct way, is for the government to take less out. And so the first line of my tax plan is your first 150 grand tax-free, no state income tax. Now, the cost of that in terms of lost revenue to the state, we've calculated, is about $20 billion a year. So tomorrow you'll be seeing, I'll show how, and then the second part of my tax plan, so that, if you like, is pro-worker. And then there's a pro-growth component, which is a flat tax of 8% above 150,000. And that is another 20 billion or so. So tomorrow we'll be laying out how we get to that number.
Yeah. There is, as you know, a billionaire tax on the ballot, which has been very divisive within the Democratic Party. Governor Newsom has been a big opponent. Unions, by and large, but it's mixed, but a lot of them supporting it. Apart from that ballot measure, which I know you oppose, do you think billionaires, of which there are a fair number in California, are they paying their fair share?
Right now, the top 1% in California pay about 50% of the state income tax.
But that's a different question.
Well, I mean, the billionaires are definitely part of the 1%. And so I think if you look at the proportion of our revenue that comes from the wealthiest people, I think it's more than fair. Absolutely. That in many ways, the billionaires are carrying California. I mean, all this money that is being spent on, whether it's productive and useful things that we would all support, for example, law enforcement and schools and so on, that's where it's coming from, the billionaires. Not just directly, but through the jobs and wealth that they create through their entrepreneurial activities. So I think that there's no question that the motive for this wealth tax, which is, the ostensible motive is more money for healthcare, which is why all the unions that are not in healthcare oppose it.
Not all.
Well, a lot of them. By the way, that itself is a pretext, because in fact the amount of money coming from the federal government that goes into California for healthcare is going up next year. So, and the $100 billion that they're talking about raising, let's just put some numbers against that. I visit many hospitals around the state. The first thing they always say to me, the first thing any hospital you go to is, please help us with the cost of this seismic refit that we have to do. Yeah. It's estimated that the cost of this seismic refit that was passed years ago, that itself is $100 billion for the hospitals to pay. I mean, the estimate is 50 to 60 hospitals will close in the next couple of years.
Do you think they shouldn't be retrofitted?
Not in a blanket way. You've got a very different...
They've had decades to do it.
They have, but also there are some parts of the state where the seismic risk is much higher than others. And I think the kind of blanket is a classic example of bureaucracy, where you're putting a blanket rule onto everything regardless of the risk. So I think it needs to be much more attuned to the risk. But the point I'm making is that even the justification for the billionaire's tax doesn't really add up. And all it's doing is it's already cost billions of dollars. It will have a net negative impact on our finances. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, part of, and I don't want to get into this any deeper, but I think one of the arguments they make is that, they're paying that tax largely through income tax. And what a lot of CEOs, Larry Ellison and many others, they'll take $100 a year in salary, and that gets taxed at a high level. And the rest of it is net assets that don't get taxed at that level. I mean, that's what I was getting at about fairness. I mean, do you think, because they're able to shelter a lot of that as their income.
But just in terms of the amount of tax that they pay, the numbers are huge. I mean, that's where it's, you're right about the income tax. They're paying many other ways, property tax and so on. So I just think that, and actually many do pay a lot of income tax, not all, but they pay a lot of tax. They pay the majority of the tax revenue to California. And so I think also the other, I mean, I don't think people have understood enough how if it's implemented, it would pretty much destroy the innovation ecosystem, and it would destroy Silicon Valley, because the whole basis of how that venture capital financing works is unrealized income. You've got someone who's on paper worth, I don't know, billions, but actually does, and you charge them, they don't have the money. And so all of that will go. And actually because of the pandemic and remote working, whatever, the mobility of business, particularly technology, is far greater than before. This is why I keep coming back to, I think we face a real emergency. I think there's a lot of complacency around our economy right now, precisely because we've got still a small number of very large tech companies that are generating huge amounts of revenue, but they're not creating jobs.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the fears about AI, is that it's creating a lot of wealth, and there's going to be a lot of upside in terms of medical research and many, many other things. But we're already seeing, and maybe it's an excuse, some of these companies laying off and saying, "Oh, we're replacing it with AI." But nonetheless, there's a fear that this is going to exacerbate the wealth gap, which is already huge in California.
Right.
So how would you think about that as governor?
The way I think about that is to use a tech. Remember, I was the founder of a tech company. I want us to have the full stack of tech jobs in California. The point I made in the speech, most of the tech companies, the majority of their workforce is outside the state. There's actually a lot of construction, manufacturing, good working class, middle class jobs associated with the AI boom, but all of that is happening somewhere else. You just saw this massive new Terafab plant that Elon Musk is building. It's the biggest advanced semiconductor manufacturing facility in the world. It should have been here, but it's not here. It's going to be in Texas. And so I think that that's my point, that actually AI also will enable a manufacturing renaissance in America, because now through precision automation and so on, you're going to be able to manufacture. The cost advantage of cheap labor in China or whatever will be gone, because you're going to be able to do it here much more affordably with automation powered by AI. But none of those factories are going to be in California and on the present track run. None of them. And just as, last year, and NVIDIA, they announced $500 billion of investment in the US. Manufacturing, factories, semiconductor, all this. None of it in California. None of it. Texas, Arizona, whatever. Anthropic, the same, etc. It's all going somewhere else. And this is why I say, it's not a healthy economy where fourth biggest economy in the world, but the highest unemployment rate in America. Yeah. And so the final point on that is we've got to have better skills training in our schools. That's a whole other strand of policy where we've got to really focus on equipping young people with not just the basic academic skills, the fact that less than half can read properly is a disaster, but practical skills as well. So I've got a whole plan around that we'll be announcing.
We are going to take audience questions, and if you have one, write it down, and I think we'll have folks that'll collect it. Just put your hand up if you have one. As I mentioned at the very top, it's been 20 years since another Republican immigrant got elected governor.
Yes, with a funny accent.
With a funny accent. And he went to Sacramento thinking he was the Terminator and kind of got his head handed to him by the unions, among others. And it kind of comes back to that first question a little bit. But, the reality is that if you have an R next to your name in California, it's a scarlet letter. It's tough. So why, Brian Dowley, who ran against Newsom, Neil Kashkari ran against Jerry Brown, John Cox, who ran against, they all more or less said kind of the things like Democrats have been in charge for so long. Look how screwed up it is. Elect a Republican. We still have a Democratic governor. So what has happened to the Republican brand? Why is it so toxic?
I think that, first of all, it's 4 more years that we've had of this Democrat one-party rule to be able to say, our ideas work, and we still haven't seen that. So I think the argument is more overwhelming than previously. I think obviously, yes, the party label is there, but each candidate is different. Within the tradition of the Republican Party, you've had many different kinds of candidates, and I'm not those previous candidates, I'm sure.
But the party is the same, and Donald Trump is incredibly
unpopular. I understand that, but look, I'm me, and I'm running as a pragmatic problem solver with business experience, government reform experience, yes, media experience, and we're going to be. We already have been fighting a very high energy, innovative campaign. There's a lot more of that to come. I think. I'm going to get to the what really underlies the question in terms of winning. This is a much more. I know people. You're probably all out there thinking, "Why am I listening to this guy? He's got no chance." I disagree. I think that actually this is a winnable race, and for the following reasons. Number one, there's a clear majority now. This wasn't the case in the previous governor's race. Who want change? I mean, whatever poll you look at, the answer to the question is, California's on the wrong track, time for change, is above 50%. Sometimes well above 50%, depending on the poll. That wasn't the case before. Yeah. Secondly, if you look at the polling behind the headline, and we did our own private poll just when, same time as the last public poll came out, had a very similar headline number, to be honest. I don't want to sugarcoat that, which basically was the summary of the votes in the primary. I got 25%, the other Republican got 10%, that's 35, all the Democrats got 65. That's a big gap. But when you look into it, the support for Becerra is pretty soft. He's not that well known. My solid support was about 33%. His was 41%, 26% up for grabs. They are mainly working class Californians who are really struggling economically. Yeah. And our message is very appealing to them. Yeah.
Some of the working Californians who are struggling are immigrants.
Yeah.
Some of them are here without documentation. They're here illegally. You were saying earlier, before we came out, that you were in the Imperial Valley.
Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I think well over half of the agricultural workers in California are here illegally. How would you deal with that in terms of I know that's not your job as governor, but this governor and this attorney general have been fighting the administration to stop some of the more egregious things and sending ICE to places in big cities. So how would you're endorsed by Donald Trump, but you're also saying you can hate Donald Trump, but you still vote for me.
Yes.
Okay, but how does that work? If you become governor, in terms of would you be opposing Donald Trump's policies?
I think my goal would be to lower the temperature on this whole issue. I think that the opposition, the confrontational attitude that Governor Newsom and Rob Bonta have taken has prompted some of this. look, even if you look at SB 54, which is the sanctuary state law that was passed in 2017, within that, you've got a really long list of crimes, ranging from very serious to pretty minor, that are, in fact, the law was criticized by the left on this basis, that enable cooperation between state and local and federal immigration law enforcement on immigration matters. And so when they say, oh, we can't work with federal immigration enforcement because of the sanctuary state law, that's literally not true.
But they are working with, I mean,
I
here
know.
in San Francisco,
Well, that's right.
liberal
So
San Francisco, the sheriff, the police, they're always cooperating
I know.
when there's a violent felony, a conviction in the past. So to say that, it's a sanctuary state
Well,
of
they're the
city,
ones saying it. I agree. So I don't know why they have to adopt that confrontational public posture when in reality there's more cooperation going on than they like to admit. And that would be my... Look, the way I see it is that we used to have actually more aggressive immigration enforcement, even than you're seeing now with the Obama administration. The level of deportations was higher. The number of deportations was just a little bit higher. And you didn't have any of this kind of confrontation then, and that's what I'd like to get back to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was probably, without having all the details, a different kind of immigrant that was being deported. Probably hadn't been in the country as long. They were maybe caught at the border and sent back. But I'm wondering, do you feel like the level of deportation where, you've got ICE showing up at airports and immigration courts and airports and schools sometimes, Home Depot parking lots, I mean, is that good for the economy?
Well, I don't think they necessarily want to be doing that. I mean, Tom Homan has said that the way Tom puts it is that he feels his agents, in their agency, they are forced into that because they don't get sufficient cooperation. That's what
But
they
these
say.
folks have not broken the law.
Well, they have because they're here illegally.
So they should, so everyone who's, okay, so just clarify, so you're saying that everyone who's here illegally, that's a civil violation, it's not a criminal code.
Well, look,
but I don't want to argue about that. Are
Yeah.
you saying that you would support the deportation of anyone here illegally, irrespective of how long they've been here, what their family situation is, or what they do?
But that's not even the administration. I think that there's, I'm a pragmatist, and I think that of course, it's reasonable to draw a line between legal and illegal, just as we do on everything. But the administration isn't seeking to deport everyone who's here illegally. So I just think what's the right question for me to think about, which I have been thinking about, is how would you behave as governor in respect of this? It's not your responsibility. It's the federal government that sets immigration policy. My choice as governor is to, well, what do? Do you try and work with them or against them? And my response to that is no. I see it as my responsibility to contribute to a situation where all our laws are peacefully enforced. That's my attitude.
Yeah. One of the things that Governor Newsom has done, and I'm curious, you mentioned public safety and so on. He enacted a moratorium on executions. Mm-hmm. And so there hasn't been an execution, since Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected, 2006. Would you undo that?
Well, look, I think that it's a bit like the previous answer. The law is the law. I'm actually opposed to the death penalty. But the people voted it was very clear that what was voted for in an initiative, and I think just to unilaterally just overrule something because you don't like it is not, especially from these people who constantly lecture us on our democracy. So I don't know. I mean, it's not.
So you would undo it. You would lift the moratorium.
Follow the law.
Well, you would lift the moratorium.
It's just like.
You'd have to lift the moratorium. You'd have to.
Well, I mean, it's a case by case. Well, I think the moratorium is for show. I mean, what it actually comes down to is individual cases, and this is the law. So I don't understand how it's okay for a governor to. And funnily enough, it's the opposite of a question that you and I discussed, and we were just talking about it, which is, when I think it's important to follow the law, despite your personal opinion. Look, as a participant in the political process, you try and argue for the changes to the law that you feel are right. And also you can't change everything you want, and you've got to focus on the battles you pick. Overwhelmingly, my focus as governor will be economic policy, because that's where I think the emergency is. But no, I think it's important to follow the law.
Yeah. So I don't mean, I know this would not be your priority, let's just say that. But, there's about, I think, 50 people on death row who have exhausted all their legal appeals. If that moratorium were lifted, you'd have a conveyor belt of people. I mean, would you be comfortable with that as somebody?
No, I wouldn't be. I've told you, I don't like the death penalty. I'm against the death penalty. If I had a vote in that initiative, I'd say no, but it's the law. I mean, I think to unilaterally rip up a law that look, by the way, I'd love to be able to follow that example on all the things that I laid out. I'd love to just rip up CEQA and all these, and the Private Attorney General Act that's destroying small businesses. But that's not, we have a rule of law, we have a constitution, there's a process for doing things the right way.
Yeah. Okay, let's take some audience questions. Many California voters might argue that the great things you mention as coming from being in California were made possible by the political climate here. Do you agree or disagree? How does one know what to preserve and what to change politically?
I don't agree that the political climate made it. Well, certainly not recently. I think that the political climate or the policy direction, this is, I think, that what happens when you have one-party rule. It always ends badly, actually, whether it's on the left or the right, you see that around the world. It's never good. And remember, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the USA this year. One of the foundational ideas is checks and balances to stop things from becoming too extreme.
How's that going?
Well, not well in California. It's like you can make that in California we've had no check, no balance, all one direction. I think that's why we've had extreme policy pushing us in a direction that's been very destructive for our economy, with the results that we can all see: the highest poverty rate, unemployment rate, cost of living in the country. So I think that the great advantages of California that will enable us to very quickly rebound when we stop doing all these stupid things are the things that were done not by the government. It's the things that actually people and entrepreneurs and the natural beauty we all have, and the reason it's such an attractive place. None of that was done by the government. Of course, I don't want to overstate it. Government built the freeways and the State Water Project and the UC system, all those things. I list them, and I'm very proud of them. So it's not. I'm not some nihilistic, abolish government kind of person. Not at all. But we've got to get things in proportion. We've got to dial it back. It's gone way to the extreme.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about housing, and I think everyone agrees housing is unaffordable, too expensive, not enough of it, supply and demand. California has. Governor Brown, Governor Newsom has signed dozens of bills, including things to weaken CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, to enable developers to build more quickly, more easily, and to take away local communities' right to object to housing under a lot of circumstances. And there's now a requirement on local governments to build a certain amount of housing. So the question here is, should the state take action if localities refuse to build housing?
No, I completely disagree with that kind of top-down approach. Completely disagree. And it's been a failure because...
Well, it's barely been implemented.
Well, we haven't had the scale of building that we need, not by a long way. I mean, in 2018, when he was running, he promised 3 million homes. We're like a third of that. If
that's less.
If that, yeah, okay. So the thing is that I think there's different layers to this. And I've spent a lot of time on it because before I even decided to run for governor, and I think actually the first big issue I looked at was housing. I tried to get an initiative on the ballot to deal with some of the things. I mean, let's go through them quickly. Number one, there's a very simple thing we can do on the cost, which is impact fees. It's a hidden tax on housing. The Turner Center in Berkeley estimates it's now up to 20% of the cost of a new home. Matt Mahan agrees about that. We've got to cap impact fees. Secondly, the building codes, way in excess of what's sensible, make it much more expensive to build here, 2 or 3 times as expensive, as I mentioned. We can scale that back.
And some of that has happened, I think.
The big ones, though, that are much more contested are CEQA and CEQA litigation and zoning in terms of where you build. CEQA litigation, there's a lot of consensus. That's what Proposition 45 on the ballot this year, that would eliminate the private right of action under CEQA. That would eliminate all these nuisance, frivolous lawsuits that block housing. So that's
Eliminate it altogether.
Yes, it would. There's something called the private right of action under CEQA, which is why you have all these lawsuits. That would be eliminated. So the only people that could actually implement the law would be the DAs of a county or the attorney general. It's a huge change. That's Proposition 45. That's on the ballot in November. That would be transformational. But the big one I really want to talk about is this question of where you can build. And this is where I strongly disagree with the ideology that's been in place up to now, which is this ideology of density, that you have to, the only really acceptable place to build is within the existing development boundary. And that's behind all these things like the ADU thing and now SB 79, which is a total abomination, where you're forcing apartment buildings into suburban neighborhoods that don't want them, instead of allowing. So I've got a very simple, common sense approach to this, which is instead of forcing housing into places that don't want it, why don't we allow housing to be built in the places that do want it? And there are, I'm on the road the whole time. There's so many places in California where they want to build a new subdivision, build outwards, single-family homes. I just feel that I'm just completely in a different place to the prevailing ideology. They call all that sprawl. I call it the California dream. That's what the California dream is, a single-family home. And that's why I use those numbers in my speech. Like they say, we already have one of the highest densities in the country. Barely, 5, depending which way you look at it, 5 to 6% of our land is developed. You could increase that to 7%. You'd barely notice. You'd still be in the same point in the league table nationally, but with room for 5 million people in single-family homes.
But then you got to provide services to all those people.
Yes, because I want to build, because we can have water infrastructure and energy. This is the point. There's this ideology of scarcity. It's driven by climate extremism, which says we can't build, we can't have energy, can't have water. It's not true. We can have abundant water and energy and all these things if we just had a different attitude, which is let's build, let's grow. That's why we just need a complete sea change in this, and that's what I want to lead.
Okay. Another audience question. President Trump has endorsed you. Do you agree with him that the 2020 election was stolen?
No.
Next question.
Yes.
Okay. So locally, there is a ballot measure in California, Prop 39, which would require voters to present a government-issued ID in order to vote. I know you support that. Obviously, the Republicans have made a big issue of this, and Democrats have dug in, and it is what it is. But it seems to many to be a solution in search of a problem. I mean, the amount of fraudulent voting is, vanishingly small. I mean, it is. It is. I mean, some of the people who were fraudulently voted in 2020 voted for Trump. I mean, it's a very small number.
Well, I think that the number one thing that's gone wrong in California, and it really is a problem. And actually, it's not just Republicans who say that. The New York Times editorial board wrote a very powerful editorial, and it's connected to the.
They love telling us what to do.
Well, I know it connected to how long it takes and the counting and the days and days after the election. Is this universal mail-in voting, which I just disagree with. I think that was a very bad move, especially when you combine it with two other things that we've legalized in California, which is ballot harvesting and the fact that we've got, again, not me saying this, it's the Secretary of State, millions of wrong names on the voter rolls. People who've moved address within California maybe 2 or 3 times, registered still at each location, so they get ballots sent to each location. People who've moved out of state, people who've died. There's millions of wrong names. That creates this, millions of ballots that are out there, and that creates the opportunity for suspicion around what's going on with ballot harvesting.
But there's no evidence that people are sending in ballot. Where's the evidence?
Well, it's
that those people are voting?
ballot harvesting is legal.
Yeah, but that's different from what you're saying.
No, I mean, I'm just saying that we've seen video of people, signing up for people being registered to vote, being paid to do that, taking people's names off the register. I just think it's a very insecure system, and it's not, and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that. And I think that all these things were done in the name of expanding, making it easier to vote. You want to take the sort of good intention here.
Yeah.
It was to say, we want as many people to vote as possible. We don't want barriers in the way of people voting. I agree with that. But it hasn't even led to an increase in, hasn't even met those objectives. All it's done is undermine confidence in the process. So I think it's very important that we used to all trust in the elections. And I think these very rapid changes that were made, particularly prompted by the pandemic, have undermined all of that.
Yeah, but don't you think President Trump has contributed to that? I mean, saying that the elections are fraudulent and all mail-in votes should be discounted. I mean,
what's that?
Whatever. But I mean, like, some of the counties with the highest rate of mail-in ballots are Republican county, like Shasta County, 70% for Trump. I guess what I'm asking is, are you saying that the mail-in ballot, the universal mail-in ballots, which just means everybody gets a ballot,
yes,
but they can go vote in person if they want to.
Clean up the voter rolls if you're going to do that.
Yeah, that's fine, but that's a different thing. You said,
yeah, but they're connected. So you've got three things. You've got universal mail-in, you've got voter rolls that are millions, wrong by the millions, and ballot harvesting, which really is crazy. I mean, the idea that you can have, union activists or others just going around collecting ballots on people's behalf, I just think it used to be the case that a named person that you knew could go and take your ballot in for you, and then they changed the law to make it anyone. Yeah. And I just think there's no justification.
Yeah. You make a good point that for as easy as they've made it to vote, the number of people voting has not really gone up. Okay, here's another question. We got about 5 minutes left. What are your positions on gay and trans rights? In your opinion, did California lead the way in destigmatizing HIV/AIDS? Contribute to national public health, or was Reagan, for most of his term, closer to the approach that was correct? You can take any part of that you want to.
No.
How do you feel about trans rights? Have we made too big of an issue about it?
I think you've got to have a clear line between adults and children. I think that's the sort of first point. I say all the time, I don't want to tell anyone how to live. I just want everyone to live the way that they want. I'm a strong believer that people should be able to live the life that they want, that the government shouldn't get involved in that. And I celebrate that. And that sense of freedom and is part of California. And so I strongly support that. However, when you come to children, it's a completely different matter. Yeah. And I think that we have to be very clear. I mean, and actually the really interesting thing for me here was, when the left, they Medicare for all, which is the big thing that you hear from Bernie Sanders and the guy in Michigan and so on, which is basically the UK National Health Service. That's the model that they want to follow. Well, the UK National Health Service did a 2-year review into all of this, led by a very serious professional doctor who everyone respected in this field, Dr. Hilary Cass, the Cass Review, and it had a very clear conclusion that we should never be giving irreversible medical treatments to children at all. And it's been stopped by the UK National Health Service. Yeah. And I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, equating Medicare with the British health system is not quite right. I mean, Medicare, you go to a private doctor, right? It's not, you don't go to a government doctor.
Well, fair enough. Medicare, yes, single payer, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated, but it's not
but even
same.
in the UK system, we tried to introduce some competition in terms of the provider. You're right; it wouldn't be one employer. Although some people want to see that here.
Yeah, okay, I don't.
They actually want to.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, okay, right. You're right.
Some other time.
It'll take a long time. Some other time, right?
This is a slam dunk for you. Will you put an end to the bullet train and its imaginary tracks?
Yes. It's actually a very quick point on this. It's actually my colleague running for State Controller, Herb Morgan, he's looking at the money in great detail. The original legislation setting it up was very clear that this would operate without public subsidy. And in the business plan that they just published a month or so ago, it's very clear that it would need public subsidy. In other words, it's not just a complete waste of money and a fiasco, it's actually illegal, which gives us very strong grounds for stopping the payments on day one.
Okay, let's see here. What can you answer in 2 minutes? Talked about housing. Supporting you has become controversial due to Trump's endorsement. We want you to win. We want change. Have you thought of rejecting his endorsement for a more broad appeal?
No. I think that the point is actually you touched on it, and it was we had a very. This is what I think. I understand, obviously, you don't need to be a genius, that there's a lot of people in California who just can't stand the president. And they are also people who want change. There are millions of Californians, some of them even Republican, certainly independents and Democrats, who don't like President Trump, who would rather have a Democrat in the White House, but who desperately want change in California. And my argument is, let's focus on the things that we control in California. That's what I'm running on. And yes, it is absolutely the case, and I'm saying it very clearly. Yes, you can be anti-Trump and still vote for change and vote for me.
Yeah. You said during the campaign, with a debate with Chad Bianco, you're very proud of President Trump. You still feel that way?
Well, the endorsement, yeah. I mean, I'm a new American.
That was before he endorsed you. You're proud of what he's done as president.
Well, I'm not sure. What's the exact... I mean, I certainly think that the
Let me find
general... Look, I'm very much aligned with him on the economic policy, on the way that... I mean, he's focused on boosting our energy supply in California, on fighting fraud within the system. There's a lot of things that I agree with, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's kind of his own worst enemy in some ways, don't you think?
I think that a good rule for me is to focus on my job that I'm running for in California.
Yeah. All right. On that note, thank you, Steve Hilton,
thank you very
candidate
much
for governor, for joining us today. For more information about membership or upcoming Commonwealth Club World Affairs programs, please visit commonwealthclub.org. I'm Scott Schaefer. Thanks so much for coming. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was fun.
Thank you.